They called him the Prince of Steel. Lorenzo Rossi, a man who possessed private jets, skyscrapers in New York, and vineyards in Florence. He could buy anything on earth, except for one thing: his dying mother's memory. He was engaged to a supermodel, feared by his competitors, and known for his icy temper. But the day he walked into that high-end restaurant, he wasn't looking for a deal. He was looking for a miracle. And he found it not in the VIP section, but in a clumsy waitress with holes in her shoes. When she opened her mouth and spoke 5 simple words in a language no one else understood, the Prince of Steel didn't just freeze. He fell. This is the story of how a billionaire lost his heart to the only woman who could speak to his soul. The heels of Elena Vance's black work shoes were worn down to the nub. Every step sent a sharp jolt of pain shooting up her calf, but she didn't dare limp. Not tonight. Tonight, the Gilded Lily, New York City's most pretentious and expensive French restaurant, was fully booked. Table 4 needs water. Table 7 needs bread. Vance, move your feet, or you're out on the street. The voice belonged to Marcus Henderson, the floor manager. He was a short, sweating man who took immense pleasure in tormenting the staff, specifically Elena. He knew she was desperate. He knew about the medical bills for her grandmother piled up on her kitchen counter in Queens. He knew she couldn't afford to quit. "I'm going, Mr. Henderson," Elena whispered, clutching the heavy glass pitcher. Her knuckles were white. Elena was 24, with messy chestnut hair she tried to tame into a bun, and eyes the color of warm honey, eyes that currently looked exhausted. She was invisible here. To the wealthy patrons in their Armani suits and diamond chokers, she was just a floating pair of hands delivering filet mignon. "Careful, you clumsy idiot!" a woman hissed as Elena refilled a glass. A single drop of water had landed on the tablecloth. The woman, draped in a fur coat that cost more than Elena's entire life earnings, looked at her as if she were a cockroach. "I am so sorry, madam," Elena apologized, bowing her head. "Just get away from me," the woman snapped, waving a manicured hand. Elena retreated to the kitchen, her heart pounding against her ribs. She leaned against the stainless steel counter, taking a shaky breath. Just 3 more hours, she told herself. Just get the tips, pay the pharmacy, and go home to Nana. Her grandmother, Lucia, was the only family Elena had left. But Lucia's mind was fading, drifting away into the fog of dementia. Most days, Lucia didn't know where she was. She would just sit by the window, speaking to people who weren't there, usually in her native Italian dialect, a rare, old phrasing from the hills of Tuscany that Elena had grown up hearing. "Vance!" Henderson barked, kicking the swinging door open. "Stop idling. The VIP room is opening. We have a high-profile guest coming in 10 minutes. If you mess this up, don't bother coming back tomorrow." Elena straightened her apron. "Who is it?" Henderson adjusted his tie, looking terrified. "Lorenzo Rossi, the Italian tech mogul. He's bringing his mother and his fiancée." "I want perfection, Vance. Absolute perfection." Elena nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Everyone knew the name Lorenzo Rossi. He was ruthless. The tabloids called him the Bachelor of Ice. If he was in the building, the air pressure changed. She didn't know it yet. But the air wasn't the only thing about to change. Her entire life was dangling by a thread, and Lorenzo Rossi was holding the scissors. At 8 p.m. sharp, the heavy oak doors of the Gilded Lily swung open. The restaurant went silent. Lorenzo Rossi walked in like he owned the oxygen in the room. He was tall, over 6'2", with shoulders that strained the fabric of his custom-made charcoal suit. His hair was dark, swept back, and his jawline looked like it had been carved out of granite. But it was his eyes, dark, piercing, and utterly cold, that made the staff tremble. On his arm was Isabella Thorne, a socialite and model, known more for her temper tantrums than her runway walks. She was stunning, blonde, and looked bored out of her mind. But behind them, being pushed in a wheelchair by a bodyguard, was an elderly woman. This was Donna Sophia, Lorenzo's mother. She looked frail, wrapped in a shawl, her hands trembling in her lap. Her eyes darted around the room in confusion, fear etched into her wrinkled face. "Mr. Rossi," Henderson practically slid across the floor to greet them. "An honor, a distinct honor. Your table is ready." Lorenzo didn't look at the manager. His eyes were fixed on his mother. He knelt beside her wheelchair, his cold demeanor softening for a fraction of a second. "Mama, we are here. It's time to eat. Mangia, okay?" Donna Sophia stared at him blankly, then muttered something angry in Italian, slapping his hand away. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He stood up, the mask of ice returning. "Table. Now." They were seated in the center of the room, the prime spot. Elena was assigned to the station adjacent to them, but not directly serving them. That honor went to Pierre, the head waiter. Elena watched from the corner of her eye as she served a couple near the window. The tension at the Rossi table was palpable. "Lorenzo, does she have to be here?" Isabella whispered loudly, sipping her champagne. "People are staring. She's drooling, for God's sake." "She is my mother, Isabella," Lorenzo said, his voice low and dangerous. "She eats where I eat." "She doesn't even know who you are today," Isabella scoffed, checking her reflection in a spoon. "We should have left her with the nurses. This was supposed to be our date night." "Every night is your date night," Lorenzo snapped. He turned to his mother. Pierre placed a bowl of lobster bisque in front of the elderly woman. "Mama, soup." "Super," Lorenzo said, trying to guide her hand. Donna Sophia looked at the spoon. She looked at the red soup. Suddenly, her eyes widened in terror. She screamed. It wasn't a soft cry. It was a wail of pure, unadulterated panic. She swatted the bowl with surprising strength. The hot bisque flew across the table, splashing onto the pristine white tablecloth, Lorenzo's cuff, and, most disastrously, Isabella's silver dress. "My dress!" Isabella shrieked, standing up and knocking her chair over. "You crazy old hag! You ruined my dress!" The entire restaurant froze. Forks stopped mid-air. The music seemed to cut out. Lorenzo stood up, ignoring the soup on his suit. "Isabella, sit down," he commanded. "No, I am sick of this," Isabella yelled, her face red. "She belongs in an asylum, Lorenzo. Look at her. She's a disaster." Donna Sophia was hyperventilating now, speaking rapidly, aggressively, tears streaming down her face. She was shouting words that nobody understood, rocking back and forth, clutching her chest. Henderson, the manager, rushed over, his face pale. "Mr. Rossi, perhaps it is best if the other guests are disturbed. If you ask me to leave." Lorenzo stepped toward the manager, his voice a lethal whisper. "I will buy this building and fire you before you can blink." Henderson squeaked and stepped back. But the situation was spiraling. Donna Sophia was screaming louder, slapping at anyone who came near her. The bodyguards didn't know what to do. Lorenzo looked helpless. For the first time, the Prince of Steel looked defeated. He tried to grab his mother's hands. "Mama, basta! Please!" She didn't recognize him. She looked at him with hatred, screaming a phrase over and over again. Elena was standing 10 feet away, holding a tray of empty glasses. She heard the words the old woman was screaming. Her heart stopped. She knew that dialect. She knew exactly what the woman was saying. It wasn't just Italian. It was the specific, rural dialect of the Tuscan hills, the same words Elena's grandmother used when she had her episodes. She thinks the soup is blood, Elena realized. She's having a flashback to the war. Elena looked at Henderson. He was useless. She looked at Lorenzo. He was desperate. Without thinking, Elena set her tray down on an empty table. "Vance, what are you doing?" Henderson hissed at her as she walked past him. "Get back to your station." Elena ignored him. She walked straight into the eye of the storm. She stopped right in front of the screaming elderly woman and the furious billionaire. "Get away from here," Isabella snapped at Elena. "Can't you see we're in the middle of a crisis? We don't need a waitress to—" Elena didn't look at Isabella. She didn't even look at Lorenzo. She dropped to her knees, disregarding the soup that soaked into her uniform, so she was eye level with Donna Sofia. The old woman was trembling, her eyes squeezed shut, screaming, "Ai soldati! Il sangue! Via! Via!" The soldiers, the blood, go away. Elena reached out, but she didn't grab the woman. She softly placed her hand on the arm of the wheelchair and spoke. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chaos like a bell. "Nonna, non è sangue, è solo pomodoro della terra. I soldati sono andati via." "Grandma, it isn't blood. It is just tomatoes from the earth. The soldiers have gone away." The room went deadly silent. Lorenzo Rossi froze. He looked down at the waitress kneeling in the mess. He hadn't heard anyone speak that dialect since his father died 20 years ago. It was a peasant dialect, rare and dying. Donna Sofia stopped screaming. Her eyes snapped open. She looked at Elena. She blinked, her breathing ragged. Elena smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached her tired eyes. She continued, her voice melodic and thick with the accent she had learned at her own grandmother's knee. "Guarda, bella signora, vedi il pane? I soldati non portano il pane. Siamo a casa. Siamo salvi. Look, beautiful lady, do you see the bread? Soldiers don't bring bread. We are home. We are safe." Donna Sofia stared at Elena for a long, agonizing moment. Then her trembling hand reached out and touched Elena's cheek. "Lucia?" the old woman whispered. "Sei tu? Lucia? Is that you?" Elena didn't correct her. She just leaned into the touch. "Sì, sono qui. Mangia un po' di pane per me?" "Yes, I am here. Will you eat some bread for me?" The old woman let out a long, shuddering sob, not of fear, but of relief. Her shoulders slumped. The terror evaporated from her face. She nodded slowly. Elena reached for the bread basket on the table. She tore off a small piece of soft roll and handed it to Donna Sofia. The billionaire's mother took it and ate it calmly. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Slowly, Elena stood up. Her knees were wet with lobster bisque. She realized what she had done. She had interrupted the most powerful man in New York. She had ignored her manager. She turned to face Lorenzo Rossi, expecting to be fired. Lorenzo was staring at her. The coldness in his eyes was gone, replaced by shock, and something else. Intensity. He looked at her as if she were the only person in the room. He looked at her dirty apron, her messy hair, and her name tag, E. Vance. "You," Lorenzo's voice was rough. "You speak Tosco-Emiliano dialect." Elena lowered her eyes, nervously clasping her hands. "My grandmother is from a village near Lucca, sir. She has bad days too." I recognized what your mother was saying. "She hasn't let anyone feed her in 3 days," Lorenzo said, almost to himself. "She was afraid," Elena explained softly. "The red soup. She has memories of the war, doesn't she?" Lorenzo nodded slowly, still stunned. "Well, isn't that special?" Isabella broke the spell, her voice shrill and annoyed. "The help speaks Italian. Can we please get a waiter to clean this up? I smell like fish." Lorenzo turned his head slowly toward Isabella. The look he gave her could have frozen the sun. "Be quiet, Isabella." Isabella's mouth dropped open. "Excuse me?" I said, "Be quiet." Lorenzo turned back to Elena. He took a step closer to her. He towered over her, smelling of expensive cologne and power. "What is your name?" "Elena, sir. Elena Vance." "Elena." He tested the name on his tongue. "Get your coat." Elena blinked. "Sir?" Henderson rushed forward, sweating bullets. "Mr. Rossi, I am so sorry for her behavior, interrupting your table. I will have her disciplined immediately. Fire her," Lorenzo said calmly. Elena's heart shattered. The air left her lungs. No, please." "Sir, please," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "I need this job. I didn't mean to offend you. Please don't make him fire me." Lorenzo looked at Henderson. "I said fire her, Henderson. Process her final check right now." "With pleasure, Mr. Rossi." Henderson smirked at Elena. "Vance, go to the back. You're done." Elena felt the tears spill over. She turned to run to the kitchen to hide her shame. "Wait!" Lorenzo's voice boomed. He caught Elena's wrist. His grip was firm, warm, and electric. He pulled her back gently, turning her to face him. "I told him to fire you," Lorenzo said, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "Because you no longer work for him." Elena stared at him, confused. I don't understand." Lorenzo pulled a platinum card from his pocket and dropped it on the table. He looked at Elena with an intensity that made her knees weak. "You work for me now," Lorenzo declared. "My mother just smiled for the first time in 6 months because of you. I don't know who you are, Elena Vance, or where you learned to speak the language of my childhood, but you aren't serving soup anymore." "What will she be doing?" Isabella demanded, her jealousy radiating off her in waves. Lorenzo didn't look away from Elena. "She's going to be my personal aide, and she starts right now." The ride in the back seat of the Maybach was suffocatingly silent. The leather seats were softer than any bed Elena had ever slept in, but she sat on the edge, terrified to lean back. Her uniform was still stained with lobster bisque, smelling of seafood and shame. Lorenzo sat on the right, typing furiously on his phone. Isabella sat in the middle, acting as a physical barrier between the billionaire and the waitress. She was practically vibrating with rage. "This is kidnapping, Lorenzo," Isabella hissed, crossing her arms over her ruined silver dress. "You can't just pick up a stray off the street and bring her home. She probably has a criminal record. She probably has fleas." "I am right here," Elena whispered, her face burning. "I know you are," Isabella snapped, not looking at her. "Don't speak to me." "Driver," Lorenzo said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Stop at 5th and Main. Drop Ms. Thorne off at her penthouse." Isabella's jaw dropped. "Excuse me? We are supposed to be going to your estate. I have bags there." "You are upset," Lorenzo said, finally looking up from his phone. His eyes were unreadable. "You need to cool down. I have business to discuss with Miss Vance regarding my mother's care. I will not have you shrieking in her ear while we do it." "You're choosing the help over me?" Isabella's voice rose an octave. "I am your fiancé." "We are not married yet, Isabella. Do not test my patience tonight." The car pulled over. The bodyguard opened the door. Isabella looked from Lorenzo to Elena, her eyes narrowing into slits of pure venom. "Enjoy your little game, Lorenzo," she spat. Then she leaned in close to Elena, her voice a whisper that smelled of expensive champagne. "Make no mistake, you little rat. You won't last a week. I will chew you up and spit you out." She stormed out of the car. The door clicked shut, sealing Elena in the quiet darkness with the Prince of Steel. "Where do you live?" Lorenzo asked. The air in the car instantly felt lighter, but more charged. "Queens," Elena stammered. "But, Mr. Rossi, I can't just leave. I have my grandmother. She's sick. I can't leave her alone at night." "Is she the one who taught you the dialect?" "Yes." "She raised me." Lorenzo tapped on the glass partition. "Take us to Queens." The ride to Elena's apartment took 40 minutes, as the sleek black car moved from the glittering lights of Manhattan to the potholed, dimly lit streets of her neighborhood. Elena felt a fresh wave of embarrassment. They pulled up in front of a peeling brick building with bars on the windows. A group of men standing on the corner stared openly at the multi-million-dollar car. "Please, you don't have to come in," Elena said quickly. It's not nice." Lorenzo opened his door and stepped out onto the cracked sidewalk. He looked out of place, like a panther standing in a landfill. "Lead the way." Elena led him up the 3 flights of stairs. The elevator had been broken since 2018. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and old cigarettes. She unlocked her door, praying Nana hadn't left the stove on. The apartment was tiny. A single room served as the kitchen and living area, with 2 small bedrooms off to the side. It was clean, but aggressively poor. The furniture was mismatched, salvaged from thrift stores, but the most prominent feature was the table covered in orange prescription bottles and red past-due notices. Lorenzo walked in, his tall frame making the ceiling feel low. He didn't look at the furniture. He looked at the bills. He picked one up. St. Mary's Hospital. Final notice. 12,400. "Is this why you were working at that restaurant?" he asked. Elena snatched the paper from his hand. "I pay my debts, Mr. Rossi. Slowly, but I pay them." From the back room, a frail voice called out, "Elena? Chie? Elena? Who is it?" Elena rushed to the bedroom. Grandma Lucia was sitting up in bed, confused. Lorenzo followed Elena to the doorway. When Lucia saw Lorenzo, she didn't look scared. She squinted. "Un dottore? A doctor?" "No, Nana," Elena soothed her, fixing her blankets. "This is my boss." Lorenzo stepped into the small room. He looked at the photos on the dresser, black and white pictures of the Tuscan countryside. He looked at Lucia. "Signora." Lorenzo bowed his head respectfully. "Buonasera." Lucia smiled toothlessly. "He has kind eyes, Elena. Sad but kind." Lorenzo stiffened. He turned to Elena. "Pack your things." "What? I told you I can't leave her." "I didn't say leave her," Lorenzo said, pulling out his phone again. "I am sending a medical transport team. They will be here in 1 hour. Your grandmother is coming with us." Elena gaped at him. To your house?" "My estate has 20 bedrooms, Elena. It has a medical wing. I have private nurses for my mother around the clock. Your grandmother will have her own room, her own nurse, and the best doctors in New York." "Why?" Elena asked, her voice trembling. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." Lorenzo stepped closer. The room was so small they were inches apart. Elena could see the flecks of gold in his dark irises. "Because tonight, for the first time in years, my mother didn't scream herself to sleep," Lorenzo said quietly. "She ate bread. Because of you. I am a businessman, Elena. I invest in things that work. You work." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded contract. He must have had his lawyers draft it while they were in the car. "The salary is $10,000 a month, plus room and board, plus full medical coverage for you and your grandmother. Your only job is to be a companion to Donna Sofia, to speak to her, to calm her." Elena looked at the contract. It was more money than she could make in a year. It was salvation. It was a miracle. Tears welled up in her eyes again. "I don't have nice clothes. I don't know how to act in a mansion." "I don't care about clothes," Lorenzo said. his voice dropping to a low rumble that vibrated in her chest. "I care about the peace you brought into that restaurant. Do we have a deal?" Elena looked at her grandmother, who was humming softly. She looked at the pile of bills. She looked at the Prince of Steel, who was offering her a lifeline. "Yes," she whispered. "We have a deal." The Rossi estate, known as Villa d'Oro, was not a house. It was a fortress of limestone and glass situated on a private cliff overlooking the Hudson River, an hour outside the city. When the car pulled through the iron gates, it was nearly midnight. Elena, exhausted and overwhelmed, watched as the floodlights illuminated manicured gardens, fountains, and a garage that looked like a showroom. The medical transport had already arrived with Nana Lucia. She was settled in a ground-floor suite that looked like a five-star hotel room, monitored by two nurses who spoke in hushed, respectful tones. Elena was shown to her room by the head housekeeper, Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable was a woman made of sharp angles and starch. She had been at the estate for 30 years, and clearly didn't approve of a waitress moving into the guest wing. "These are your quarters," Mrs. Gable said, opening a door to a room larger than Eleanor's entire apartment. It had a balcony, a king-sized bed, and a bathroom filled with marble. "Mr. Rossi requests your presence at breakfast at 8 a.m. sharp. Do not be late. He despises tardiness." "Thank you, Mrs. Gable," Elena said. "And Miss Vance?" The housekeeper paused at the door. "Miss Thorne has left some of her belongings in the wardrobe in this room. Do not touch them. She visits frequently." Elena nodded, feeling a chill. Isabella's territory. The next morning, Elena woke up before her alarm. She didn't have any resort wear, so she put on her best pair of jeans and a simple white blouse. She tied her hair back and went downstairs. The house was a museum, high ceilings, modern art that cost millions, and silence, cold, echoing silence. She found the dining room. Lorenzo was already there, drinking espresso and reading a tablet. He was wearing a casual navy polo shirt that showed off the muscles in his arms, a stark contrast to the suit from the night before. "Good morning," Elena said shyly. Lorenzo didn't look up. "Coffee is on the sideboard. My mother is in the sunroom." Elena poured herself coffee, feeling the awkwardness. "How is she?" "She had a nightmare at 4 a.m., Lorenzo said, finally looking at her. His eyes were tired. The nurses couldn't calm her. I had to sit with her for an hour. "You should have woken me," Elena said. "You were tired. You had a long night." Lorenzo studied her face. "Today, we test the arrangement. Go to her." Elena nodded and headed to the sunroom. The sunroom was a beautiful glass-enclosed space filled with orchids. Donna Sofia sat in her wheelchair, staring at the river. She looked small and lost. Elena took a deep breath. She approached slowly. "Buongiorno, signora Sofia," Elena said in the dialect. "Il sole è caldo oggi." "The sun is warm today." Sofia turned her head. Recognition flickered in her eyes. It wasn't total, but it was there. "Lucia?" she asked again. "Elena," she corrected gently. "I am Elena. Lucia is sleeping. Shall we look at the flowers?" Elena spent the next 3 hours with the woman. She didn't treat Sofia like a patient. She treated her like a neighbor. She gossiped about the weather in Italian. She sang old folk songs about harvesting grapes. And she held Sofia's hand. At noon, Lorenzo walked past the open door of the sunroom. He stopped dead in his tracks. His mother was laughing. It was a dry, rusty sound, unused for years, but she was laughing. Elena was telling a story, with animated hand gestures, about a goat that climbed a church tower in their ancestral village. Lorenzo leaned against the doorframe, his heart hammering a strange rhythm. He had spent millions on doctors, specialists in Switzerland, experimental drugs. Nothing. And here was this girl in cheap denim, bringing his mother back to life with nothing but stories and warmth. Elena looked up and saw him watching. She blushed and stopped talking. "Don't stop," Lorenzo said, walking into the room. The intensity was back in his eyes. "She seems happy today," Elena said softly. Lorenzo knelt by his mother. "Mama?" Sophia looked at him. She smiled. "Enzo, look. She knows the song about the goat." Enzo. She hadn't used his childhood nickname in 5 years. Lorenzo looked at Elena. For a moment, the distance between the billionaire and the waitress vanished. There was only gratitude, raw and profound. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. "It's my job, sir." "No." Lorenzo stood up, towering over her. "This isn't a job. You are giving me back something I thought was gone forever." He reached out, almost unconsciously, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind Elena's ear. His fingers brushed her skin. Elena stopped breathing. The touch was electric. Lorenzo seemed to realize what he was doing and pulled his hand back quickly, clearing his throat. "I have to go to the city for a meeting," he said abruptly, his voice returning to business mode. "Isabella will be arriving this afternoon for the weekend. Try to stay out of her way." Elena's stomach dropped. "She's coming here?" "She stays here on weekends. It is customary." Lorenzo looked uncomfortable. "If she bothers you, tell me." "I can handle myself," Elena lied. Lorenzo looked at her, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I believe you can, Elena Vance." Isabella arrived at 3:00 p.m. like a hurricane. She arrived in a red convertible, looking like a movie star and acting like a warlord. She stormed into the house, throwing her keys at a maid. "Where is she?" Isabella demanded of Mrs. Gable. "Miss Vance is in the garden with Donna Sophia," the housekeeper replied. Isabella marched out to the garden. Elena was pushing Sophia's wheelchair along the rose path. "Well, look at this," Isabella sneered, walking up to them. "The nanny and the lunatic. A perfect match." Elena stopped the wheelchair. She turned to face the supermodel. "Hello, Miss Thorne. Mrs. Rossi is enjoying the fresh air. Please lower your voice." "Mrs. Rossi doesn't know what planet she's on." Isabella laughed cruelly. She stepped closer to Elena, invading her personal space. "Let's get one thing straight. You might have fooled Lorenzo with your little peasant act, but I see you. You're a gold digger. You saw a vulnerable billionaire and his sick mummy, and you pounced." "I am here to work," Elena said firmly. "You're here until I decide you're gone," Isabella hissed. "I am the future mistress of this house. When I marry Lorenzo, the first thing I'm going to do is put this old hag in a state facility and throw you in the gutter." Donna Sophia, sensing the aggression, started to whimper. "Get away from her." Elena stepped between Isabella and the wheelchair. The waitress was gone. The protective granddaughter was here. "You upset her." Isabella looked shocked that the servant girl dared to stand up to her. A malicious glint appeared in her eye. "Fine, play the hero. But remember, accidents happen." Isabella spun on her heel and walked back to the house. The rest of the afternoon was tense. Elena stayed in her room with Nana Lucia once her shift with Sophia was done. She avoided the main areas of the house. Dinner was served at 8 p.m. Lorenzo had returned from the city. He sent word that he expected Elena to join them for dinner. "I can't," Elena told the maid. "It's not appropriate." "Mr. Rossi insists," the maid said. Reluctantly, Elena went down. She wore the only dress she had packed, a simple black sundress that was far too casual for the formal dining room. Lorenzo sat at the head of the table. Isabella was on his right, wearing diamonds and a dress that cost more than Eleanor's education. Elena was seated on his left. "So," Isabella swirled her wine. "Elena, tell us, what exactly qualifies you to care for a woman with advanced dementia? Did you go to medical school, or is your degree in waiting tables?" "Isabella," Lorenzo warned, cutting his steak with precision. "I'm just asking, darling. We have to be careful. We have valuables in this house." Isabella smiled sweetly. "My experience comes from my family," Elena said quietly. "Love is a better qualification than a degree sometimes." Lorenzo looked at Elena with admiration. Isabella saw the look, and her grip on her wine glass tightened until her knuckles were white. "Speaking of love," Isabella said, "Lorenzo, did you notice my bracelet? The vintage sapphire one you gave me?" Lorenzo glanced at her wrist. "You aren't wearing it." "I know," Isabella frowned. "I took it off in the library earlier to wash my hands. I left it on the side table. Now it's gone." Lorenzo stopped eating. "Gone?" "I looked everywhere. I asked the maids. No one saw it." Isabella's eyes flicked to Elena. "But I did see someone coming out of the library earlier. Someone who looked very lost." Elena's heart slammed into her throat. "I was never in the library." "Don't lie, dear," Isabella said smoothly. "I saw you." "Isabella, are you accusing her?" Lorenzo asked, his voice low. "I'm just saying it's suspicious. A girl with debt up to her eyeballs suddenly has access to a house full of jewels? We should check her room, just to be sure. To clear her name, of course." "This is ridiculous." Elena stood up. "I didn't take anything." "Then let us look," Isabella challenged. Lorenzo looked at Elena. He wanted to trust her. But he was a man of logic, and the logic of the situation, poverty meets opportunity, was a hard thing to ignore. "Elena, if you didn't take it, a search will prove it." "You don't believe me?" Elena felt a stab of betrayal. "I want to clear this up," Lorenzo said. "Mrs. Gable." The housekeeper appeared. "Yes, sir. Go to Miss Vance's room. Search her bag." Elena stood there, shaking. She knew she hadn't taken it. She had nothing to hide. 5 minutes later, Mrs. Gable returned. She held a small velvet pouch. She looked pale. "Well?" Lorenzo asked. Mrs. Gable walked to the table and tipped the pouch over. A heavy sapphire and diamond bracelet clattered onto the mahogany table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Elena gasped. "No, that's not. I didn't put that there. She planted it." She pointed at Isabella. Isabella let out a theatrical gasp. "Oh my God, Lorenzo, I told you, she's a thief. She's a common criminal." Lorenzo stared at the bracelet. Then he looked at Elena. The warmth was gone from his eyes. The Prince of Steel was back. "I let you into my home," Lorenzo said, his voice deadly quiet. "I trusted you with my mother." "Lorenzo, please look at me," Elena pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't steal this. Why would I steal from the only person who ever helped me? She hates me. She put it there." "Call the police," Isabella said triumphantly. "Have her arrested." "No police," Lorenzo said. He stood up. He couldn't look at Elena. The disappointment in his face was worse than anger. It was cold detachment. "Get your things. You and your grandmother leave tonight." "Lorenzo, please!" Elena stepped toward him. "Don't touch him!" Isabella shrieked. "Get out!" Lorenzo roared, slamming his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. "Before I change my mind and call the authorities, get out of my house!" Elena sobbed, a broken, wretched sound. She turned and ran from the room. Isabella smirked, picking up her bracelet and clasping it back onto her wrist. "You see, darling, I told you, you can't turn a street rat into a pet. They always bite." Lorenzo didn't answer. He stared at the empty doorway, feeling a strange, crushing weight in his chest. He had been right about business deals his whole life. How could he have been so wrong about her? Or was he? Upstairs, Elena frantically packed her bag. She had to wake Nana. They had to go back to the freezing apartment, back to the debt, back to nothing. But as she zipped her bag, she noticed something. The side pocket of her purse, where Mrs. Gable had found the bracelet, was torn. The lining was ripped. Wait. She grabbed the purse. She checked the rip. It was a clean slice, made by a razor or a knife. And inside the lining, she felt something else. She reached in and pulled out a small black electronic device. A voice recorder? A tracker? She pressed the button. Isabella's voice, tinny but clear. Check the library. Make sure the cameras are off. I'll drop it in her bag when she's in the garden. Elena froze. It wasn't a tracker. It was Isabella's digital dictaphone. She often used it to record notes for her wedding planner. She must have dropped it into the bag by accident when she was planting the bracelet, in her haste to frame Elena. Elena held the device. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She had the smoking gun. She wiped her tears. She wasn't leaving. Not like this. She turned around and headed back downstairs. The dining room was silent, save for the clinking of Isabella's fork against the fine china. She was eating with gusto, the sapphire bracelet glittering mockingly on her wrist. Lorenzo sat like a statue, staring into his wine glass, the dark liquid reflecting the turmoil in his eyes. He felt a sickness in his gut, a distinct feeling that he had just kicked a puppy. "Darling, stop brooding," Isabella chattered, wiping her mouth. "You did the right thing. You can't have thieves around your mother. It's dangerous. I'll call the agency tomorrow and get a proper nurse, one who wears a uniform and knows her place." Lorenzo didn't answer. He was thinking about the way Elena had looked at him. Not with fear, but with betrayal. Pure, shattered betrayal. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the dining room swung open. Lorenzo looked up, his brow furrowing. Isabella dropped her fork with a clatter. Elena stood in the doorway. She hadn't changed clothes. She was still wearing the simple black dress, her face streaked with dried tears, but her posture had changed. She wasn't slouching. She wasn't trembling. She looked like a queen returning from exile. "I told you to leave," Lorenzo said, though his voice lacked its usual bite. "I am leaving," Elena said, her voice steady. "I'm taking my grandmother, and I'm never coming back. But before I go, there is something you need to hear." "Oh, spare us the sob story." Isabella rolled her eyes, standing up. "Security! Get her out!" "Sit down, Isabella," Lorenzo barked. The command was so sharp that Isabella actually sat back down, stunned. Lorenzo looked at Elena. "What is it?" Elena walked forward. She didn't look at Isabella. She walked straight to the head of the table and placed the small black device on the mahogany surface next to Lorenzo's wine glass. "What is this?" Lorenzo asked. "Mrs. Gable found the bracelet in my bag," Elena said. But she didn't notice that the lining of my bag had been sliced open to hide it. And she didn't notice that the person who hid it dropped something of their own inside the lining. Isabella's face went drain white. She recognized the dictaphone. That's mine," Isabella stammered, reaching for it. "Give it to me. It's private." Lorenzo's hand shot out, covering the device before Isabella could touch it. He looked from the panic in Isabella's eyes to the steely resolve in Elena's. "Why are you so afraid of your own voice recorder, Isabella?" Lorenzo asked softly. It's wedding vows. I was practicing my vows. It's embarrassing." Isabella lied, her voice rising in hysteria. "Don't play it, Lorenzo. I forbid you." Lorenzo pressed the play button. The audio crackled for a second, and then Isabella's voice filled the silent dining room. It wasn't the sweet, public voice she used. It was her real voice, harsh, calculating, and cruel. "Make sure the cameras are off in the library. I'll drop the bracelet in her bag when she takes the old hag to the garden. God, I hate this house. Once I have the ring, I'm putting Sophia in a home the next day. And that little Italian rat, I'll make sure she never works in this city again. Lorenzo is such a fool. He thinks he's so tough, but he's desperate for anyone to help his mummy. Pathetic." The recording clicked off. The silence that followed was heavier than the limestone walls of the villa. It was a suffocating, terrified silence. Isabella was frozen, her mouth half open. Elena stood tall, watching Lorenzo. Lorenzo Rossi did not move. He did not scream. He stood up slowly, unbuttoning his suit jacket with methodical calmness. He walked around the table until he stood directly behind Isabella's chair. "Lorenzo," Isabella whispered, tears of panic welling up. It's a deep fake. It's AI. She made it. She's trying to frame me." "You called my mother a hag," Lorenzo said. His voice was a low rumble, like thunder before a tornado. "You called me a fool." "Baby, please. And you framed an innocent woman because you were insecure," Lorenzo continued, leaning down so his face was inches from Isabella's ear. "I can forgive a bad business deal, Isabella. I can forgive a lot of things. But cruelty? Cruelty to my mother? Cruelty to the woman who saved her?" Lorenzo reached down and took Isabella's left hand. "Lorenzo, what are you doing?" she shrieked. He slid the massive diamond engagement ring off her finger. "You are leaving," Lorenzo said. "Now, you will not pack a bag. You will not take the car. You will walk out of that door, and if I ever see your face again, I will destroy you. I will ruin your reputation so thoroughly you won't be able to get a job at a gas station." "You can't do this to me," Isabella screamed, standing up. "I am Isabella Thorne. You are nothing," Lorenzo spat. "Get out." Isabella looked at him, then at Elena. She let out a scream of frustration and ran out of the room, her heels clicking frantically on the marble floor. A moment later, the front door slammed. Lorenzo stood there, clutching the ring. He took a deep breath, his chest heaving. Then, slowly, he turned to Elena. Elena didn't move. She watched the man she had started to care for, the man who had just defended her with the ferocity of a lion. Lorenzo looked at the ring in his hand, then tossed it onto the table as if it were a piece of trash. He walked toward Elena. The anger drained from his face, replaced by a look of profound shame. "Elena," he said, his voice cracking. "I'll go get my grandmother," Elena said quietly, turning away. "The medical transport should be here soon." "No." Lorenzo moved faster than she thought possible. He stepped in front of her, blocking her path. He didn't touch her. He didn't feel he had the right, but he stood there, a barrier of regret. "Please," Lorenzo said, "don't go." "You told me to get out," Elena reminded him, her eyes flashing. "You believed her. You didn't even ask me. You just looked at my poverty and assumed I was a thief." "I was a fool," Lorenzo admitted. Just like she said. I was a blind, arrogant fool. "I am so used to people wanting my money, Elena, that I forgot what integrity looks like. But you have more integrity in your little finger than I have in my entire bank account. I can't stay here, Lorenzo. You hurt me." "I know." Lorenzo dropped to his knees. The Prince of Steel, the billionaire who commanded empires, knelt on the hard floor in front of the waitress. "I am begging you." Lorenzo looked up at her, his dark eyes shimmering with emotion. "Not for my mother. Not for the contract. For me. Please don't leave me in this empty house. When you walked in here, you brought light into a tomb. If you leave, the darkness will be unbearable." Elena looked down at him. She saw the vulnerability he hid from the world. She saw the lonely boy who just wanted his mother back. She saw the man who had fallen in love with her, even if he didn't know how to say it yet. "Get up, Lorenzo," she whispered, reaching out her hand. "Not until you say you'll stay." "I'll stay," she said softly. Lorenzo took her hand. He pressed his face into her palm, kissing the rough skin of her working hands. Then he stood up and pulled her into his arms. It wasn't a polite hug. It was a collision. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in her scent of vanilla and soap. Elena wrapped her arms around his broad shoulders, feeling the tension melt out of him. "I am so sorry," he murmured into her hair. "Ti amo. I didn't realize it until I thought I lost you. Ti amo, Elena." Elena pulled back, looking into his eyes. "You love me?" "From the moment you spoke Italian to my mother," Lorenzo smiled, a real, dazzling smile. "You stole my heart right then. I just was too stubborn to admit it." He leaned down and kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted of redemption, of passion, and of a future that was no longer lonely. 1 year later, the garden of Villa d'Oro was in full bloom, filled with the scent of jasmine and roses. But today, it was also filled with people. There were no stuffy business partners or fake socialites. The guests were a mix of old friends, the staff of the restaurant where Elena used to work — Marcus Henderson was not invited — and neighbors. At the front of the aisle sat Donna Sofia. She looked healthier than she had in years. Her hair was brushed, her cheeks were pink, and she was holding hands with Nana Lucia. The two old women sat together, speaking in their dialect, laughing at a joke only they understood. Lorenzo stood at the altar. He wasn't wearing a charcoal business suit. He was wearing a tuxedo, and he looked nervous. He kept checking his watch. Then the music started. Not a traditional march, but an old Italian folk song, the one Elena had hummed to Sofia that first night. Elena walked down the aisle. She wore a dress of simple white lace, vintage and elegant. She didn't look like a waitress, and she didn't look like a billionaire's wife. She looked like herself, radiant, strong, and happy. When Lorenzo saw her, tears streamed down his face openly. He didn't wipe them away. She reached the altar and took his hands. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "You look okay," she teased. The priest began the ceremony, but before the vows, Donna Sofia spoke up from her wheelchair. "Enzo," she called out clearly. The guests turned. Lorenzo smiled at his mother. "See, Mama? Don't mess it up," she said. The crowd laughed. Lorenzo laughed. He looked at Elena, his eyes full of adoration. "I won't, Mama," Lorenzo promised. "I already found the treasure. I'm just keeping it safe now." They exchanged vows under the golden sun. When they kissed, the applause echoed off the cliffs and over the river. Isabella Thorne was never heard from again in their circles. Rumor had it she was trying to marry an oil tycoon in Texas. But at the villa, no one cared. That evening, as the sun set, Lorenzo found Elena on the balcony, watching the guests dance. "Happy, Mrs. Rossi?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Very happy, Mr. Rossi." She leaned back against him. "But you know, you still owe me something." "Oh?" "I gave you a diamond ring, a house, and my heart. What else do I owe you?" Elena turned in his arms, grinning. "My tips from that night at the restaurant. I never cashed out." Lorenzo laughed, a deep, joyous sound that rang out into the night. He kissed her forehead. "I think I can cover it," he said, "with interest." And as they danced under the stars, The Prince of Steel and the waitress who melted him knew that the richest thing they owned wasn't the villa or the jets or the company. It was the language of love they had built together, a language that needed no translation, and that is how a spilled bowl of soup led to a love story that changed 2 lives forever. Lorenzo thought his money was his power, but he learned that true power lies in compassion, family, and the ability to understand the ones we love. Elena proved that worth isn't defined by a bank account, but by the kindness in your heart. Isabella learned the hard way that while you can buy a diamond, you cannot buy class, and you certainly cannot buy love. Sometimes the person you overlook is the only one who truly sees you. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were in Elena's shoes when Isabella framed her? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new romantic story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.